Greetings, road warriors. Tonight, our chronicle covers something a little different. We're not following a specific highway or diving under the hood of a particular big rig. Instead, we're tracing the story of the people who built the virtual roads we all love to drive. Our journey takes us to the heart of Europe, to a small Czech studio that quietly, methodically, and almost accidentally conquered the entire world of simulation. This is the story of SCS Software. The glow of the monitor on a dark night, the familiar rumble of a simulated engine, the quiet satisfaction of a delivery completed just before you drift off to sleep. It's a unique kind of peace. Let's be honest. That feeling of finally nailing a perfect 90-degree reverse park into a tricky depot on the first try with no spotter, that's a satisfaction that's hard to find anywhere else. It's a quiet mastery. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always a pleasure to see who's riding along, so I'd love to see where you're all listening from tonight. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story begins, not in a garage in Silicon Valley, but in a city shaking off the dust of decades, a city breathing new free air for the first time in a generation. We begin in Prague, in the early 1990s. The Velvet Revolution of 1989 had been just that, a remarkably peaceful, almost polite transition that ended 41 years of one-party rule under the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia. The Iron Curtain, that grim, tangible barrier, had rusted, buckled, and fallen, and in its place was opportunity, a raw, undefined, exhilarating, and slightly terrifying sense of what now. This was the world that three young men, Pavel Schuber, Martin Tschirschpuver, and Petr Seidenglantz, found themselves in. They were part of the first generation to come of age, with the sudden, explosive arrival of Western technology, market capitalism, and creative freedom. They weren't grizzled old truckers with diesel in their veins. They weren't shipping magnates or logistics experts. They were programmers, tech enthusiasts. They were young guys fascinated by the burgeoning magic of 3D graphics, a field that was at the time more theoretical frontier than established industry, especially in Eastern Europe. One can only imagine what those early days were like, the hardware they would have been working on. We're not talking about multi-core processors and liquid-cooled graphics cards. We're talking about beige boxes that struggled to draw a few polygons without breaking a sweat. Here's a key historical fact for you. SCS Software was officially founded in Prague in 1997. This was a pivotal time. The Czech Republic, now a separate entity from Slovakia, was on a fast track to Western integration. It was a nation rebuilding its identity, and there was this incredible hunger to prove that they could compete on the world stage. Not just in heavy industry or beautiful glassware, but in the brand new digital-first world. The human element here is the sheer audacity of it. In a country where just a few years prior, private enterprise was practically forbidden, and information from the West was a filtered trickle, these three friends decided to start a company. Not just any company, but a video game company. A software development studio. It's the kind of dream that would have been absurd a decade earlier. But in the 90s, it felt like the most logical thing in the world. Their company name wasn't the result of a fancy branding agency. It was simple, direct, and practical. SCS Software. The S, the C, and the S simply stood for their surnames. Schuber, Tschirschpuver, and Seidenglantz. It was a digital shingle hung out on the new global storefront. But what to build? When you're a programmer, the ultimate challenge isn't just making something that looks good. It's making something that works, that feels real. The allure of simulation is exactly that. It's an engineer's art form. It's not about slaying dragons or finding magic swords. It's about the incredibly complex processor melting challenge of recreating reality, physics, friction, weight, momentum, weather. These are the real end bosses for a programmer. So they set out to build an engine, a core piece of technology that could render 3D worlds and simulate real-world physics. This gives us our first technical detail, the very earliest DNA of what would one day be known as the Prism 3D engine. This proprietary engine would become their secret weapon. While other studios were licensing expensive tech from abroad, SCS was building its own tools from the ground up. This meant they knew every single line of code. It was slower, it was harder, but it gave them absolute control. It was an engine built not for speed, not for flashy explosions, but for stability and scale. It was an engine designed to build a world. You can almost picture the late-night sessions, an office, probably too small, filled with bulky CRT monitors, the clack of keyboards, and the constant hum of struggling computer fans. The founders, huddled together, not just writing code, but solving fundamental problems. How do you make a pixelated tree feel like a solid object? How do you calculate the friction of a tire on a wet digital road? How do you do any of it on a machine with less processing power than a modern-day toaster? This focus on simulation, on the how of movement, was their starting point. They weren't yet the kings of the highway. They hadn't yet settled on the satisfying rumble of a diesel engine. They were simply three ambitious Czech programmers who believed they could build a virtual world that felt real. And to fund that dream, to test their new engine, and to get their name on a box, they had to start somewhere. And where they started is perhaps the most surprising part of their entire story. It had nothing to do with chrome stacks, air brakes, or the open road. Their first journey into the wild wasn't on the asphalt at all. That proprietary engine, that little seed of code that would one day render 1,000 sunsets over the digital Rhine, needed a test. And the first test was, to put it mildly, a bit rustic. If you were to guess what a studio that would one day define truck simulation made first, you might guess racing games, or maybe some kind of city builder, or perhaps a logistics puzzle. You would be, in all cases, very wrong. The first journey SCS Software took us on was not to a depot, but to a deer stand. Yes, hunting. In 1997, the very first title developed by SCS Software was Deer Hunter. It wasn't their own property. Not yet. Here's our key historical fact. SCS operated as a developer for hire for their first major title, partnering with an American publisher called Sunbelt Interactive. Sunbelt saw a gap in the market. The mid-90s PC gaming scene was dominated by fantasy role-playing games and fast-paced corridor shooters like Doom and Quake. But there was a massive underserved audience in North America, the quiet, patient sportsman. Sunbelt had the idea, and they needed a team that could build a 3D world on a budget. They found their answer in Prague. This project was, in hindsight, a perfect test for the fledgling Prism 3D engine. Think about the technical challenge. In a shooter, developers could hide their limitations. They used darkness, narrow hallways, and fog to limit draw distance. How much of the world the computer had to render at once. But a hunting simulator, you couldn't just have deer pop into existence 10 feet from the player. You needed hills, you needed valleys, you needed long sight lines, you needed an environment. This gives us our technical detail for the night, the immense difficulty of rendering large-scale, outdoor natural environments in the 1990s. Trees were the enemy, not just one tree, but thousands of them. Every tree was a collection of polygons that would bring a mid-90s Pentium processor to its knees. SCS had to develop clever solutions to render huge forested maps that felt open, all while running on hardware that had less power than the chip in a modern musical greeting card. And then there was the AI. It was one thing to make a demon run straight at you in a corridor. It was another thing entirely to simulate the behavior of a prey animal. The digital deer had to have some semblance of real behavior. It had to wander. It had to react to sound. It had to flee. This rudimentary pathfinding AI The code that told a creature how to navigate a complex 3D hill was a massive technical hurdle. It wasn't perfect, of course. Early players would often find deer walking patiently into rocks or running in tight, confused circles, but it worked. It was a simulation. You have to appreciate the human element here, the sheer wonderful absurdity of it. Here we have our human anecdote. Picture the scene. A small office in the ancient Gothic city of Prague. Inside, a handful of young Czech programmers who likely spent more time debugging C++ than tracking game, meticulously modeling the ballistics of a .30-06 rifle and the behavioral patterns of the North American white-tailed deer. It's a hilarious cultural disconnect. You can almost hear the conversation. Pavel, this deer, does it run this way when it hears the click sound? I don't know, Martin. The file from Sunbelt just says make it skittish. They weren't experts in the outdoors. They were experts in code. And they coded what the market wanted. And the market, it turned out, really wanted it. Deer Hunter was a colossal, unexpected budget bin mega hit. It was one of the best-selling PC games of 1997, proving Sunbelt's theory correct. Naturally, this meant one thing: more hunting games. SCS, now a proven partner, became the go-to studio for the virtual sportsman. They followed up with Rocky Mountain Trophy Hunter, Deer Hunter II, and Deer Hunter 3. They weren't just in the hunting business. They were the kings of the hunting business. They even branched out. If their engine could simulate a forest, why not the ocean? And so, the world was gifted with Shark, hunting the great white. The logic was sound, the execution slightly surreal, but their simulation work wasn't confined to just the hunt. They also dipped their toes into the equally patient world of angling with pro-base fishing in 2003. Again, it was a simulation problem. How do you render water? How do you make it look transparent? How do you simulate the physics of a lure, a line, and a fighting fish? It was another complex set of variables, another test for their evolving Prism 3D engine. This decade of hunting and fishing was not a detour, it was the foundation. It seems like a bizarre footnote, but everything SCS learned in these games was critical. They learned how to build large, open, stable worlds. They learned how to simulate basic physics and AI. They learned how to render complex environments on weak hardware. And most importantly, they learned that there was a massive, quiet audience out there that didn't want to save the world. They just wanted to engage in a virtual version of a real-world hobby. They wanted to simulate. These games paid the bills. They built the studio's capital, grew their team, and sharpened their tools. Every polygonal tree they rendered, every digital fish they programmed, was a stepping stone. They had mastered the virtual wilderness. But the founders, especially Pavel Sheba, had their eyes on a different kind of wilderness. Not one of trees and lakes, but one of asphalt, diesel, and steel. They had proven their engine could handle nature. Now, they were about to test it against the machine. The call of the open road was getting louder, and SCS was about to answer it in a way that would change their destiny and the simulation genre forever. The virtual forests of North America had been thoroughly and profitably hunted. The digital base of its lakes had been fished to the point of extinction. SCS Software was now a stable, experienced studio, sitting on a pile of modestly earned capital, and, more importantly, a mature and flexible game engine. Their work-for-hire days on the hunting beat were winding down, and the founders, still driven by that core fascination with simulation, were looking for the next challenge. They had built their house out of digital trees. Now they were ready to pave the driveway. The question was, what precisely to simulate next? The answer, it seems, was always thrumming in the background. The same quiet, patient, methodical audience that enjoyed the slow burn reward of tracking a deer or waiting for a fish. They were the same people who understood the romance of the open road, not the flashy, high-octane world of street racing, but the steady, powerful, economic backbone of the world, the heavy hauler, the big rig, the 18-wheeler. The spark, as it turns out, came from this realization. The appeal wasn't in the speed, it was in the weight, it was in the responsibility, it was in the sheer massive presence of the machine. And so, in 2 SCS, set to work on a new project. This time, it wasn't for Sunbelt. This gives us our key historical fact. In 2002, SCS Software released Hard Truck, 18 Wheels of Steel, published in North America by ValueSoft. Now, the Hard Truck name itself wasn't entirely new. It had been used on a couple of earlier, very different trucking games from a Russian developer. But 18 Wheels of Steel was SCS's definitive statement. This was the game that would ignite their true legacy. Like the hunting games, it wasn't a $60 blockbuster. It was a $20 budget title, the kind of game you'd find in a wire bargain bin at Walmart or a computer parts store, right next to a learn-to-type CD-ROM. And like the hunting games, it would find its audience and sell in quiet, massive numbers. This game was the blueprint, everything that millions of players would one day experience in Euro Truck Simulator 2, and American Truck Simulator began here, in this charmingly clunky 2002 title. The Prism 3D engine, once tasked with rendering pine trees and skittish deer, was now rendering highways, depots, and the hulking forms of semi-trucks. The game's premise was simple, but for its time, remarkably deep. You weren't just a driver, you were a businessman. This is our technical detail for the night, the creation of the core SCS gameplay loop. You started as a lowly owner-operator with a single basic truck and a bit of cash. You'd drive to a depot, represented by a gloriously low polygon warehouse, and pick from a list of available cargo, chemicals, textiles, fruit. The descriptions were brief. You were given a destination, maybe San Francisco to Phoenix, and a deadline. Then you were on the road. For the first time, it wasn't just about getting from A to B. You had to manage your fuel, pulling into pixelated gas stations. You had to watch your speed, as rudimentary police cars would happily fine you, eating into your profits. And most critically, you had to manage your fatigue. A little blue sleep icon would appear. And if you ignored it, your virtual driver would start to doze off, the screen fading to black for terrifying, highway drifting seconds. You had to pull over at a motel and rest, drive, earn, manage, sleep, repeat. This simple, compelling loop was the secret sauce. The map was a hilarious, wonderful abstraction of the Western United States. It was America, the greatest hits. You could leave the deserts of Nevada and about 15 minutes later be in the green forested hills of also Nevada, apparently. Cities like Los Angeles or Las Vegas were represented by a small grid of streets, a couple of depots, and a gas station. But it didn't matter. To the player, it felt enormous. The illusion of crossing state lines, of battling a steep grade, of making a long night haul, it was all there. And then there were the trucks. Oh, the trucks. They were not, shall we say, licensed. This brings us to our human element, the charming era of the knockoff truck. You couldn't drive a Peterbilt or a Kenworth. Instead, you drove a Titan, a Majestic, or a Runner. These were vehicles that looked like someone had described a real-life truck to the 3D modeler over a very bad phone connection. It's angular, you know, but also rounded, with many wheels. Yet, we loved them. We formed attachments to our blocky, legally distinct haulers. We felt the pride of selling our starting Runner and upgrading to the Majestic, with its slightly different shaped headlights. But the true human interest story, the one that forged the community, was the shared trauma of the AI traffic. The artificial intelligence in Hard Truck 18 Wheels of Steel was less intelligence and more artificial chaos. Cars would stop dead on the highway for no reason. They would swerve directly into your lane as you were passing. They would brake check a 40-ton rig with the suicidal confidence of a squirrel on an espresso binge. Driving in 18 Wheels of Steel was a defensive, stressful, and often infuriating experience, and it was brilliant. It made the world feel unpredictable. It made you work for your delivery. When you finally backed that trailer into the drop-off zone, a process that itself probably caused a few broken keyboards, you didn't just feel like you'd completed a task. You felt like you had survived. You had triumphed. The game was a success. It wasn't a Madden or a Grand Theft Auto, but it proved to SCS that their hunch was correct. There was a dedicated audience for this. People wanted to simulate this job. They wanted the responsibility. They wanted the challenge. And they even weirdly enjoyed the mundane, the quiet thrum of the engine, the click-clack of the turn signal, the satisfaction of a clean run. SCS had found its niche. The spark had been lit, and as any good business does when it finds a formula that works, they didn't waste a second. They put that formula right back on the assembly line. The decade of the 18-wheeler was just beginning. SCS Software had found its golden goose. It was loud, it was heavy, it was fueled by digital diesel, and it was a runaway hit in the $20 bargain bin. Hard truck. 18 Wheels of Steel proved the concept. The core loop of drive, earn, manage, and sleep was more than just a game mechanic. It was for many players a kind of zen, a digital ritual. So, having struck this rich vein of simulation gold, what does a small, smart, and ambitious Prague studio do? They do what any good mining operation would. They start digging, and they dig fast. What followed was not a slow, deliberate sequel every 5 years. This was the early 2000s, the Wild West of PC game development. SCS entered what can only be described as its prolific decade, a period of rapid, almost relentless iteration. They were, in essence, building their future masterpiece in public, one yearly installment at a time. The 18 Wheels of Steel moniker became a franchise, a reliable brand that players knew would deliver that specific, satisfying experience. Just 1 year after the first game, in 2003, they released 18 Wheels of Steel across America. The title said it all. Here is our key historical fact for the night. This was the first game in the series that truly lived up to the American dream, by offering a map that spanned the entire continental United States. The first hard truck had confined players to the western states, a large sandbox to be sure, but across America broke down the invisible wall. For the first time, you could pick up a load in San Francisco and, in theory, haul it all the way to New York City. Of course, this America was a glorious abstraction. This gives us our geographic detail. The scale was comically compressed. You could cross the entire state of Texas in the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. The Rocky Mountains were a series of steep, polygonal hills, and the Great Plains were, well, they were very flat and very green. Cities were still just a handful of city blocks, but the feeling was what mattered. The sheer sense of scale was immense for its time. You'd drive out of the Californian desert, climb through the snowy passes of what was allegedly Colorado, and descend into the rainy green highways of the East Coast. It introduced different weather zones, a simple feature that made the world feel alive. The human element here was that shared experience, a new kind of digital pilgrimage. Players on early internet forums would share their first cross-country stories. Just made it from Miami to Seattle. A user would post, "Took me 2 hours and I only flipped the truck once. The AI tried to kill me in St. Louis." Then, barely giving players time to catch their breath, SCS dropped 18 Wheels of Steel, pedal to the metal, in 2004. This game was more of everything. The map was expanded again, this time pushing north into the snowy roads of southern Canada and south into the dusty highways of northern Mexico. The roster of legally distinct trucks grew, but the biggest change was in the intensity. The AI, which had previously been merely homicidal, was now given a badge. The police presence in Pedal to the Metal was turned up to 11. They were aggressive, they were psychic, and they would hunt you down for being 1 mile over the speed limit. It added a layer of, let's call it, arcade-style stress that the community was divided on. It was also, notably, a bit of a graphical leap. The Prism 3D engine was maturing, the trucks had more polygons, the lighting was a little softer, and the world was starting to look less like a collection of colored blocks and more like a stylized, albeit still simple, world. This rapid-fire development continued. 2005 saw 18 Wheels of Steel, Convoy. The big hook here was that you were no longer a lone wolf. You could hire AI drivers, buy them trucks, and form your own, well, your own convoy. You could, in theory, roll down the highway with your own fleet. In practice, the AI for your own drivers was about as reliable as the traffic. You'd often find your brand new, expensive virtual truck, driven by driver Dave, wedged patiently against a guardrail or taking a scenic detour through a field. It was an ambitious idea that the technology of the day couldn't quite pull off, but it showed that SCS was already thinking about the management side of the simulation, not just the driving. Then, in 2006, came 18 Wheels of Steel, Haaland, and this was the one. Here is our human element for the section. For many longtime fans, Haaland is the high watermark of the original series. SCS seemed to take a breath. They refined, rather than just added. The graphics were cleaner, the physics felt weightier, and the management side was more balanced. But its true legacy was its friendliness to the modding community. Haaland became the definitive platform for modders. This is when the community truly took the keys. Players began releasing their own trucks, meticulously modeled, correctly licensed in spirit, if not in law. Peterbilts, Kenworths and Freightliners. They built new trailers, new sound packs, new physics. Haaland became a canvas, a stable base game that the community could build upon for years. The series wrapped up with American Long Haul in 2007, a polished version of Haaland with the Mexico-Canada maps integrated, and then took a fascinating hard left turn. In 2009, SCS released 18 Wheels of Steel, Extreme Trucker. This is our technical and historical fact, all in one. Extreme Trucker completely abandoned the open-world owner-operator formula. It was a mission-based game, and the theme was pure, unadulterated danger. The developers at SCS had clearly been watching Ice Road Truckers. This game gave you 3 of the most hostile environments on Earth. The Australian outback, with its multi-trailer road trains, the high-altitude Bolivian Yungas Road, the Death Road, and the icy tundra of northern Canada. The physics were tweaked for maximum peril. Your truck would slide, your trailer would threaten to pull you off a cliff, and the challenge was pure survival. It was a test, SCS flexing its engine's muscles to see if it could simulate not just the mundane, but the terrifying. This frantic decade, from Hard Truck in 2002 to Extreme Trucker in 2009, was SCS Software's adolescence. They were growing up in public, finding their voice, and building their toolkit. They had simulated America from coast to coast. They had simulated it from top to bottom. They had even simulated its most dangerous roads. They had mastered the 18-wheeler, but their engine was capable of more. And as a European company, there was a whole continent right outside their office window they had yet to truly explore. But first, a small yet significant detour was in order. They were about to find out if their simulation magic worked on a very different kind of heavy vehicle. That decade of the American 18-wheeler was a whirlwind of iteration, a frantic and prolific period that built the company's reputation. But while the main team in Prague was busy iterating on the highways of Haaland and the icy cliffs of Extreme Trucker, a smaller group within the studio was quietly working on a detour. It wasn't a distraction, it was an experiment. The Prism 3D engine had proven it could handle the physics of an articulated tractor trailer. It could render wide-open highways and small functional depots. But what about a different kind of heavy vehicle? One that operated not in the lonely stretches between states, but in the most complex, chaotic, and rule-based environments of all. What about the inner city? And so, in 2007, smack dab in the middle of their 18 wheels of steel heyday, SCS Software released a new title with a deceptively simple name, Bus Driver. There was no subtitle, no wheels of steel, just Bus Driver. Like their previous games, it was a budget title, published in partnership with companies like Astragon in Europe, and it did exactly what it said on the box. This was the great public transport detour. Here's our key historical fact. Bus Driver completely diverged from the open-world, owner-operator in a sandbox formula that SCS was becoming famous for. This was not a bus simulator in the way we think of ETS today. You did not own a bus company. You did not choose your own cargo, which in this case was people. You did not drive aimlessly around a giant map. Instead, Bus Driver was a tightly structured, mission-based game. You were a jobbing driver, and you were given a very specific task: drive Route 12, the school run, or take the double-decker on the city centre loop. The game was set in a large fictional city called Thameside, a sort of generic blend of American and European cityscapes. It had tight, winding residential streets, broad downtown avenues, bridges, tunnels, and of course, a highway loop connecting it all. The game was broken into 12 distinct routes, and your job was to complete them, under a variety of conditions: sunny days, rain, and the dreaded night shift. But SCS introduced a new, far more terrifying antagonist than the psychotic AI drivers of Holland. This new enemy was the schedule, the tyranny of the timetable. This brings us to our technical detail for the night: the shift in physics from load-bearing to passenger comfort. In 18 wheels of steel, the only person you had to please was yourself. You could slam the brakes, take a corner on 2 wheels, and as long as the truck didn't flip and the cargo wasn't damaged, which it rarely was, you were golden. Bus Driver changed the rules. The game was watching you. It wasn't just grading you on whether you arrived, it was grading you on how you arrived. A little icon on the screen would flash if you accelerated too hard, braked too suddenly, or took a turn too fast. Every jolt was a demerit, a virtual passenger tutting at your lack of professionalism. You had to be smooth. This forced SCS to refine a whole new side of their physics engine, focusing on inertia, suspension, and the gentle, progressive application of power and braking. And then there was the vehicle itself. A truck's pivot point is at the 5th wheel. A standard bus, however, is a long, rigid box. The new challenge was mastering the overhang. You had to learn that when you make a tight right turn, the back end of your bus swings out wide, ready to smack a light pole, or, worse, a car in the next lane. The game even included the ultimate test of this physics: the articulated bendy bus. Driving this thing was a whole new kind of nightmare, a floppy, unpredictable beast that seemed to have a mind of its own. This all ties into our human element, the new, unique, and deeply mundane stress of the bus driver experience. You would be at a red light, your on-time indicator still a healthy, happy green. The light changes, you pull away, and a single, beige AI sedan decides to pull out from a side street right in front of you. You are forced to stop. You watch, in silent, simmering rage, as your on-time indicator clicks over to late. Your perfect run is ruined. You curse this digital citizen, this simple polygon box that has single-handedly destroyed your career. The game was a masterclass in this kind of low-stakes, high-investment anxiety. You had to hit your stops, precisely at the little bus stop sign. You had to indicate for every turn. You had to obey every traffic light. It was, in its way, more demanding than any ice road. This little detour was far more important than it looked. It wasn't just a quick cash-in, it was SCS Software, putting itself through driving school. The 18 Wheels of Steel games had taught them how to build highways. Bus Driver taught them how to build cities. It forced them to create complex, multi-lane intersections, traffic light-controlled junctions, and tight urban environments that actually functioned. It taught them how to implement a far more granular and realistic set of rules and penalties, and it refined their physics to reward smoothness, not just speed. This experiment was a quiet success. It found its audience, just like the trucking games did, and it proved that the Prism 3D engine was a versatile workhorse. They had simulated the lonely highways of America. They had simulated the chaotic, schedule-driven streets of a fictional city. They had now, in their digital garage, the physics for articulated trailers, the physics for long rigid buses, and the code for complex city maps. All the pieces were on the table. It was time to come home. It was time to combine everything they had learned and point their virtual cameras at the continent they knew best. Europe was called. The Prague studio had, in a sense, completed its apprenticeship. The frantic iterative decade of 18 Wheels of Steel had taught them how to build large, open, American-style sandboxes. It had perfected the core economic loop that was so strangely addictive. Then the Bus Driver detour had forced them to become virtual civil engineers, teaching them the logic of complex city streets, the tyranny of the timetable, and the subtle physics of passenger comfort. They had all these pieces of code, all this experience, and a proprietary engine that had proven it could handle just about any heavy vehicle they threw at it. Now, it was time to come home. It was time to combine these two halves of their education and create a new, definitive experience. It was time to simulate the roads they drove on every day. In 2008, the studio released the game that would truly define their future. It was called, with their now signature simplicity, Euro Truck Simulator. This wasn't just 18 Wheels of Steel, Holland with a different map. This was a ground-up rethink, a new beginning. Here is our key historical fact. The 2008 release of the first Euro Truck Simulator, or ETS1, marked the creation of the modern SCS formula, synthesizing the open-world economy of their American games with the rule-based, geographically complex world of Bus Driver. This was the game that established the career path that millions of players now know by heart. You no longer started as an owner-operator with a cheap, hand-me-down rig. You started as, well, as a nobody, a driver for hire. You owned nothing. You would take quick jobs, teleporting from city to city, driving another company's truck, hauling their cargo, and earning a modest paycheck. You were just punching the clock, but with every job, your bank account grew. You'd earn enough to finally go to the virtual bank, take out a massive, terrifying loan, and buy your first truck. Then, and only then, did the game truly open up. You were your own boss. You could take your own jobs, manage your own fuel, and start building your empire. This simple progression, from wage slave to owner-operator to logistics mogul, was a stroke of genius. But the biggest star of the show was Europe itself. This is our key geographic and technical detail for the night, the immense challenge of modeling the diversity of the European road network. America, for all its geographic variety, is largely unified by a single logical highway system. Europe is not. Europe is a patchwork quilt of ancient nations, each with its own rules, its own road designs, and its own unique driving culture. The SCS team, for the first time, had to model this charming chaos. This meant, most critically, driving on the left. The map included the United Kingdom, and the first time a player crossed the English Channel, via a virtual ferry, of course, and was spat out onto the motorway, the panic was real. Why is everyone coming at me? Oh no, it was a trial by fire. And then, the roundabouts. So many roundabouts. This simple, efficient, and utterly terrifying piece of traffic flow design, which Bus Driver had flirted with, was now a core mechanic. You couldn't just barrel through an intersection. You had to yield, you had to merge, you had to navigate your 60-foot articulated lorry around a tiny landscaped circle while impatient AI cars buzzed around you like angry wasps. The trucks themselves were a whole new breed. The long-nosed, conventional Peterbilts and Kenworths of the American highways were virtually non-existent in Europe due to strict regulations on total vehicle length. The European standard was the cab-over engine, or COE. This is our technical detail. With a cab-over, the driver sits directly on top of the engine, giving the truck a flat, snub-nosed appearance. This design maximizes the length available for cargo. For the player, it meant a totally different driving feel. The turning radius was tighter. You felt like you were sitting on the road, rather than behind a long protective hood. The game launched with its familiar cast of legally distinct brands: the majestic Mercedes-Benz, the valiant Volvo, the swift Scania, and the runner, Renault. Each was a loving, if slightly warped, tribute to its real-world counterpart. And this brings us to the human element, the first truck moment. Ask any long-time ETS player, and they remember it. That moment when, after hours of grinding quick jobs, you finally had enough credits, or a big enough loan to go to the truck dealer. You'd buy your very first rig. It was probably the weakest, most basic model, a runner with a tiny engine. You couldn't even afford a new paint job, but it was yours. You'd drive it out of the dealership, and for the first time the game felt real. You were no longer just a driver, you were a hauler. The responsibility was yours. The fuel bill was yours. The repair bill, after you inevitably scraped it against a guardrail while admiring it, was yours. It was a rite of passage. The map was, by modern standards, incredibly primitive. It was a greatest hits of Western Europe. You could drive from London to Berlin, then down to Madrid, then over to Rome. Cities were, once again, just a small loop of streets with a few depots. The transitions between countries were often just a sign on the side of the road, but the illusion was perfect. You'd be cruising on a wide, well-maintained German autobahn, enjoying the lack of a speed limit, and then you'd cross into Poland, and the road would suddenly become a two-lane, pothole-ridden country lane. It captured the feeling of a cross-continental journey. Euro Truck Simulator was a huge success, particularly in its home market of Europe. It was a quieter, more refined, more mature simulation than its boisterous American cousins. It had taken the arcade-like chaos of 18 wheels of steel and tempered it with the rules-based, precision-driving demands of Bus Driver. SCS had found its voice. This was their formula. They had built a solid, extendable, and deeply engaging platform. It was good, it was successful, but it was just the prototype. They were about to take this blueprint, this engine, and this new formula and build a masterpiece that would turn their small Prague studio into a global phenomenon. The success of Euro Truck Simulator in 2008 wasn't just a happy accident. It was the culmination of a decade of hard-won experience. But all that experience, the map design, the economic model, the vehicle physics, was just software. It all had to run on something. It needed a foundation. And at SCS, that foundation was, and remains to this day, their single greatest competitive advantage. We're not talking about a truck, or a map, or a specific game. We're talking about the code that makes it all possible. We're talking about the digital ground everything is built on. Tonight, we're taking a look under the hood at the beating heart of SCS, the Prism 3D engine. In the world of game development, there are two paths. You can license an engine, like the popular Unreal Engine or Unity, paying a fee to use a powerful, ready-made set of tools. Or you can do it the hard way. You can build your own. Here is our key historical fact. From its very inception in 1997, SCS Software has developed and exclusively used its own proprietary game engine, Prism 3D. This decision, made by the founders back in their Deer Hunter days, is the single most important choice in the company's history. It meant that while their competitors were paying licensing fees or struggling to adapt third-party tools for a niche genre, SCS had total, absolute control. Every single line of code was theirs. If something broke, they knew exactly where to look. If they needed a new, weirdly specific feature, like say the physics for an articulated bendy bus, they could build it right into the engine's core. It was their secret weapon. But what is Prism 3D? What is it good at? This is our technical detail for the night. Prism 3D was never designed to be the prettiest engine. It was designed to be the biggest and the most stable. Its primary design goal, inherited from its Deer Hunter origins, was scale. It was an engine built to render enormous, seamless, open worlds on very, very modest hardware. This is why, for years, SCS games had a reputation for being laptop-friendly. The engine was a master of streaming, the art of loading and unloading chunks of the game world just outside the player's view. You could, in theory, drive from one end of the map to the other, in one continuous seamless journey with no loading screens. This was its superpower. The second part of its magic was its modularity. The engine was deliberately built to be tinkered with. The game's data files, which use the pers extension, are essentially just standard zip archives that you can rename and open. Inside, you find a beautifully logical, almost human-readable collection of text files. .c files define the trucks, the engines, the gearboxes. Sci files control the economy, the AI, the company data. This open text-based architecture was a direct invitation to the community. SCS didn't just tolerate modding, they designed the engine to encourage it. It was a brilliant move. Why pay a team of 3D artists to model every single truck accessory when you can build an engine that lets thousands of passionate fans do it for you for free? And then there's the physics. Prism 3D's physics were never going to compete with a high-fidelity racing simulator. You don't get hyper-realistic tire deformation. What you get is weight. The engine excels at one very specific, very difficult thing: simulating the inertia of a 40-ton articulated vehicle. It understands the fifth wheel pivot. It understands the terrifying pendulum-like push of a heavy trailer. It understands that you can't stop this much mass on a dime. The refinements from Bus Driver added that layer of passenger comfort, rewarding smoothness. The engine wasn't built to feel fast, it was built to feel heavy. This brings us to our human element, the life of the SCS engine programmer. These are the unsung heroes of the company. While the map makers get to post beautiful screenshots of new scenery, and the vehicle artists get to show off shiny new trucks, the engine team toils in the digital basement. They are the mechanics, working on a code base that in some places is now over 2 decades old. Every time the community asks for a new feature, dynamic weather, better lighting, walking around the truck, deformable physics, it's this small team that has to perform open-heart surgery on an engine that was first designed in 1997. They have to bolt a 21st century feature onto a 20th century foundation, all while making sure the game still runs on a 6-year-old laptop. It's a thankless, incredibly difficult job of balancing technical debt, the old, crusty code, with the demand for new, shiny features. For years, this engine had a look. You could spot an SCS game from a mile away. The lighting was a bit flat, the colors a bit oversaturated, the textures a bit plasticky. It was the visual signature of an engine that prized performance and scale above all else. But the gaming world was moving on. 2008's Euro Truck Simulator was a hit, but by 2010, the world was in high definition. Graphics cards were becoming powerhouses. Players were demanding more visual fidelity. That old, reliable, laptop-friendly engine, it was in desperate need of an overhaul. The foundation was solid, but the house needed to be rebuilt. And this rebuild, this grand renovation of Prism 3D, would be the platform for the game that would change everything. The Prism 3D engine, that trusty, decade-old workhorse, had been in the shop. The small team of engine programmers at SCS had been performing a ground-up restoration. It wasn't just about bolting on new features. It was about modernizing the foundation. They had been re-architecting the core, preparing it for a new generation of hardware and a new, far more demanding audience. The 32-bit DirectX 9 limitations of the past were being shed. The engine was being rebuilt for a 64-bit future, ready to handle more complex calculations, larger assets, and most importantly, a new, sophisticated lighting and weather system. This new, renovated engine was ready for its flagship, and in October of 2012, that flagship sailed. It was called Euro Truck Simulator 2, and at first, the world didn't really notice. It was a modest release, just like all the others. It appeared on their website, and in January 2013, it landed on the digital store shelves of Steam. It reviewed reasonably well. Trucking fans liked it, but it was not a blockbuster. It was not a Skyrim or a Call of Duty. It was by all accounts just another solid niche simulation game from that quiet studio in Prague. But then, a strange and wonderful thing started to happen. It didn't fade away after its launch week. It grew. Here is our key historical fact. Euro Truck Simulator 2 is one of the greatest examples of long-tail success in gaming history. It defied the standard spike and decline sales model. Instead, it just kept selling. As of its 10th anniversary in 2022, the base game had sold over 13 million copies. To put that in perspective, that's more than many big-budget AAA action games, and even more astonishingly, players had purchased over 80 million pieces of downloadable content. This wasn't a game, it was an economic phenomenon. It was a slow-burn, word-of-mouth fueled global hit that turned SCS from a successful niche studio into a quiet simulation powerhouse. So, why? What made this game, the one that launched in 2012, the one that broke through? The answer is threefold: atmosphere, progression, and zen. First, the atmosphere. This is our technical detail for the night. The new Prism 3D engine featured a completely revamped lighting and weather system. ETS-1 and the 18 Wheels of Steel games were perpetually sunny or perpetually rainy. The world was lit by a simple flat light. ETS-2 introduced a full dynamic day-night cycle, and it was beautiful. For the first time, you could be driving at 4 a.m. The dashboard lights of your truck would be the only thing glowing, casting a soft, comforting hum in your real-world room. Then you'd crest a hill, and the sky in the east would just begin to turn a pale, cold blue. You'd see the sunrise, then it might start to rain. The thwomp 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 of the new dynamic windshield wipers, the sound of the rain pattering on the roof, the way the headlights of oncoming cars would realistically bloom on your wet windshield. It was immersive. It wasn't just a driving game, it was an atmosphere generator. Second, the progression. The driver for hire to logistics mogul career path from ETS-1 was back, but it was perfected. It was now wrapped in a light but compelling role-playing game. You earned experience points for every successful delivery, for parking your trailer, for driving safely. You'd level up and spend points in a skill tree. Should I specialize in fragile cargo, or just-in-time deliveries, or maybe long distance? This simple mechanic gave every single delivery a purpose beyond just earning cash. It also introduced a fully fledged driver management system that actually worked. You could buy garages in different cities, hire AI drivers, buy them trucks, and watch as your little logistics empire, slowly, satisfyingly, started to print money for you in the background. Finally, the zen. This is our human element for the night. The ironic purchase that turned into a 1000-hour obsession. ETS-2 landed at the perfect moment, the dawn of YouTube Let's Play culture and the rise of Twitch. Many people, including major gaming influencers, downloaded the game as a joke. Haha, look, a truck simulator. How boring is this, they'd say. And the video would start with them crashing, flipping the truck, mocking the slow pace. But then, an hour into the video, the tone would shift. They'd be concentrating. Okay, hang on. This is a fragile load of yogurt. I have to get it to Berlin by 3 p.m. and I'm low on fuel. They had been converted. Live on camera. We all were. In a world of stressful, fast-paced, competitive games, ETS2 was the antidote. It was a quiet, non-violent single-player world where the only goals were to obey the rules, drive safely, and get the job done. It was, and is, one of the most relaxing, hypnotic, and calming experiences in all of media. It's the perfect second screen game, a digital comfort blanket you can wrap yourself in while you listen to a podcast or an entire 10-hour-long internet radio show from a real station in Finland. The map, at launch, was still an abstraction. The base game included the UK, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Germany, France, Italy, Switzerland, Austria, the Czech Republic, and Poland. And this is our geographic detail, while the base game UK map is now looked back on as famously creative. The mainland European map showed a new dedication to realism, especially in its recreation of infrastructure. SCS had become obsessed with junctions. For the first time, you'd see complex multi-level spaghetti junctions and massive autobahn crews that were recognizable, scaled-down versions of their real-world counterparts. You weren't just driving on a road, you were navigating a complex foreign road system. Euro Truck Simulator 2 was the perfect storm, a refined gameplay loop, a new engine capable of genuine beauty, and a gaming public that was, it turned out, desperate to just chill out. It was a runaway success. It was a platform. It was a hobby. But there was one glaring, legally distinct problem. The Valiant was not a Volvo. The Majestic was not a Mercedes. The small studio in Prague now had a global hit on its hands, and with that success came a new kind of power, the power to make a phone call. Euro Truck Simulator 2 was a certified slow burn phenomenon. The newly overhauled Prism 3D engine was bringing a beautiful, atmospheric, and hypnotic version of Europe to PCs all over the world. The role-playing progression, the zen of the open road, the sheer satisfaction of the core gameplay loop, it was all perfect. Well, almost perfect. There was one lingering, unavoidable, and slightly comical elephant in the room, or rather in the truck dealer. The trucks themselves were fakes. Oh, they were loving fakes. They were beautifully crafted, note-perfect homages. Any truck fan could instantly tell that the Valiant was a Volvo Fesh 16, the Swift was a Scania, the Def was, well, that one was called a Def, which felt like the legal department just gave up and changed a single letter, and the king of the fleet, the Majestic, was a proud and obvious Mercedes-Benz Actros. For the first few months, this was fine. It was part of the charm. But ATS2 was proving to be something more than just a game. It was a serious hobby. It was a platform. And for a platform dedicated to the simulation of reality, this final, glaring piece of unreality was a problem. The community, of course, fixed it in about 5 minutes. One of the most popular Day 1 mods was the Real Brands pack, which simply swapped the texture files, replacing the Valiant logo with the proper Volvo iron mark. The developers at SCS Software knew this. They were truck fans themselves. They didn't want to be in the knockoff business. But getting a real-world, multi-billion-dollar corporation to let you put their multi-million-dollar product into your video game, that is a journey of Herculean, soul-crushing, legal department-fueled difficulty. This brings us to our human element for the night, the brand manager's nightmare. You have to put yourself in their shoes. A marketing executive at a company like Mercedes-Benz, a brand built on a century of prestige, engineering, and reliability. Their job is to protect that image at all costs. Then, one day, an email arrives from a small, unknown software company in Prague. "Hello," it says. "We would like to put your new flagship truck into our game." What does that executive hear? They hear Grand Theft Auto. They picture their beautiful, expensive truck being used to run over pedestrians, to plow through a police blockade, to be driven off a cliff, and explode in a glorious, brand-damaging fireball. Their answer, understandably, was a very fast, very polite, and very firm no, or, more likely, they just didn't answer the email at all. What SCS had to do was not just ask for a license. They had to educate. They had to prove that their game was not a game. It was a simulation. It was a respectful, professional, digital celebration of their product. Here is our key historical fact. The very first truck manufacturer to be officially licensed and included in Euro Truck Simulator 2 from day one was Renault Trucks. This was a significant first step, but the real turning point had come just before ETS2 with a small spin-off game called Scania Truck Driving Simulator. This was a game born from a partnership with the Swedish giant, Scania, one of the most passionate and community-focused brands in the industry. They got it. They saw the potential. This little game, which was more of a technical challenge and a driving test simulator, built the crucial bridge. Because of this, Scania was also one of the first brands to be fully licensed in ETS2 shortly after launch. Volvo, DF, and MAN soon followed. They saw the ETS2 phenomenon. They saw the player numbers. They realized this wasn't a liability. It was the world's greatest, most interactive virtual showroom, but getting the yes was just the start of the work. This is our technical detail for the night. The move from artist's impression to digital twin. When the trucks were fake majestics, the 3D artists at SCS could just eyeball it. They'd work from photos. Yeah, the dash looks mostly like that. The logo is kinda round. But the moment they signed that licensing contract, the rules changed. The manufacturers, in exchange for their brand, demanded perfection. They didn't just send photos, they sent the blueprints, the real deal, engineers only, top secret CAD, computer-aided design files. Suddenly, the art team's job became 10 times harder. The in-game truck couldn't just look like a Scania R-Series. It had to be a Scania R-Series, accurate to the millimeter. Every bolt head, every stitch on the seat upholstery, every single button on the dashboard, and the button had to be in the right place. The sound team could no longer use a generic big truck sound. They had to be sent out with high-fidelity recording equipment to capture the actual engine note of that specific engine model, the hiss of that particular air brake, the click-clack of that exact indicator stalk. The game's production quality skyrocketed, all because these giant corporations were now, in essence, their most demanding quality assurance testers. One by one, the brands had signed on. The community would celebrate with every free update that replaced a fake brand with a real one. But there was one holdout, one big, German, three-pointed star-shaped holdout, the most prestigious, the most famous, and the most protective brand of all, Mercedes-Benz. For almost 3 years after the game's launch, the Majestic remained the king of the knockoffs. The negotiations were long, they were difficult. And here is our definitive historical fact. It wasn't until early 2015, in a massive free update, that Mercedes-Benz was officially added to Euro Truck Simulator 2, finally retiring the Majestic brand. The day that patch dropped, the community went wild. It was the end of an era. The last piece of the puzzle had slotted into place. The game's universe was, at last, real. All 7 of the major European truck manufacturers were now in the game. SCS Software, the small studio from Prague, had conquered the corporate world. They had gained the trust of these industrial legends. They had real trucks, a real map, and a real massive audience. But that audience was, so far, entirely solitary. Every player was in their own, single-player universe. The next logical step was to connect them. The game was real. The trucks were real, the physics were weighty, the sunrises were beautiful, and the player base was now numbered in the millions. But there was a fundamental truth to the Euro Truck Simulator 2 experience, a truth that was both its greatest strength and its most profound weakness. It was a solitary life. Every player was the star of their own single-player movie. You were a ghost, hauling invisible cargo through a world populated by simple robotic AI. You might be driving the same stretch of road as another human player, in the exact same truck, at the exact same time, and you would sail right through each other, completely oblivious. The loneliness of the long-distance trucker was, in ETS2, a literal digital fact. But humans are social creatures. We want to connect. We want to share. We want our accomplishments to be seen. The community, as it always does, found a way. This is our human element for the night. The rise of the Truckers MP mod. This was not an SCS product. It was a brilliant, chaotic, and completely unauthorized third-party hack. A team of modders had reverse-engineered the game, and through sheer force of will, injected true, real-time, massively multiplayer support into this quiet, single-player world. And the result was pandemonium. It was beautiful, hilarious, and utterly terrifying. The highways, once so quiet, were suddenly flooded with hundreds of real, unpredictable humans. People would form giant, 50-truck convoys. They would block depots. They would drive their tiny little pilot cars in front of their friends. And of course, they would drive their pink Scanias at 120 miles per hour on the wrong side of the road, straight into your perfectly delivered fragile cargo. It was a mess. It was a phenomenon. And the developers at SCS watched this with a mix of, one must assume, awe and absolute horror. They had spent years crafting a Zen experience, a relaxing, sleepy road trip simulator, and the community had immediately, gleefully, turned it into Mad Max Fury Road. SCS knew they needed an official, online component. They had to connect their players, but they couldn't, or wouldn't, endorse the chaos of direct multiplayer. It would shatter the peace that was, for most players, the entire point of the game. So, they came up with a third way, a typically SCS solution. It was quiet, it was clever, it was asynchronous, it was not multiplayer, it was social driving. They called it World of Trucks. Here is our key historical fact. World of Trucks was launched in 2013, not as a game update, but as a separate, external browser-based platform. It was, and is, a website, worldoftrucks.com. This wasn't a new game mode you selected from the main menu. It was a parallel universe, a meta-game that sat on top of your single-player world and connected it to everyone else's. To join, you had to go to the website, create a profile, and link your Steam account. It was a deliberate, extra step. You had to opt in to this new connected world. So, what did it actually do? This is our core technical detail. World of Trucks invented the external contract. When you're playing ETS2 offline, your game's internal client-side economy just makes up jobs for you. They're random, they're meaningless, they're just for you. But when you log into World of Trucks and take an external contract, you are accepting a job that has been generated by the SCS server. You are now part of a shared, persistent, global economy. The job you are hauling, that load of yogurt from Berlin to Prague, is from the same pool of jobs that every other connected player has access to. At first, this was a subtle distinction, but it was the foundation for everything. By having a central server, SCS could now track things. Your profile on the website became your official, public-facing trucker's logbook. You could upload screenshots of your rig to a photo studio, creating a kind of Instagram for virtual trucking. You could, in a small but brilliant touch of personalization, create your own custom, unique vanity license plate on the website, and it would magically appear on all your trucks in-game. It was the first time your online identity was truly visually represented in your single-player world. But the real magic came with events. With a central server, SCS could now set global, community-wide goals. Operation Big T, one of the first, celebrated the release of a new trailer pack by challenging the entire community to deliver 1 million loads of, well, whatever it was. Then there were the Christmas events. Deliver 1 million tons of Christmas presents. You'd pick up a beautifully decorated trailer of gifts, and as you drove, you were still alone in your game. But you knew that at that very moment, thousands of other drivers were also out there, in their own worlds, hauling the same cargo. You were a part of a massive, invisible, global convoy. When the community hit the goal, everyone who participated would get a free, exclusive reward, a special paint job, or a little bobblehead for your dashboard. It was the perfect solution. It connected everyone, gave them a shared purpose, and fostered a sense of community, all without letting them crash into each other. It preserved the zen. It was the best of both worlds. The World of Trucks platform was a massive success, a brilliant piece of social engineering that gave real, collective meaning to the solitary, single-player grind. The studio in Prague now had a true, global living platform. They had the real trucks. They had a beautiful, renovated engine. They had a massive, dedicated, and now connected community in Europe. But the company's DNA, their entire origin story, was still rooted across the Atlantic. The success of ETS2 was built on the foundation of a decade of simulating the American highway. The community that had grown up with 18 wheels of steel was happy for their European friends, but they were starting to get nostalgic. They missed the long chrome-plated noses. They missed the rumble of a big, unrestricted cat engine. They missed the wide, endless, straight-line highways of the American West. The call of the other open road was getting louder. It was time for SCS to go home, back to where it all began. Euro Truck Simulator 2 was the undisputed king of the road, and World of Trucks was the new, digital CB radio connecting its millions of loyal drivers. The Prague studio had, by any measure, made it. They had a global platform, the respect of the entire trucking industry, and a business model that was the envy of the gaming world, a long tail of success that just kept growing. But there was this echo, a rumble from the past. For every driver, happily cruising the German autobahn or navigating a tiny British roundabout, there was another player in the community forums, typing the same familiar question over and over for years. This is great, but when do we get to go back to America? It was a fair question. The company's entire legacy was built on the asphalt of the American highway. The 18 Wheels of Steel series, for all its clunky charm, was the DNA. It was the foundation. And the fans of that series, the ones who had grown up with the suicidal AI of Hauling and the absurdly compressed map of across America, were looking at the beautiful, atmospheric, fully licensed world of ETS, too, with a deep, profound sense of jealousy. They wanted that. They wanted this level of polish, but with their trucks. The long-nosed, chrome-covered, quintessentially American conventionals. The dream of a modern, high-fidelity 18 Wheels of Steel was the community's great what-if. SCS Software, of course, was listening. It was perhaps the single most requested thing they had. And so, after years of development, running in parallel to the ETS2 content, they were finally ready. Here is our key historical fact. On February 2nd, 2016, SCS Software officially released American Truck Simulator. This was not ETS3. It was not a replacement. It was a brand new, standalone, parallel platform. It was the spiritual successor, the long-promised homecoming, the return to the dream. This brings us to our human element for the night, the overwhelming feeling of nostalgia made new. For veteran players, launching ATS for the first time was a powerful, almost emotional experience. The menus were familiar, the ETS2 DNA was obvious, but then you went to the truck dealer, and there it was, not a Titan or a Runner. It was a Peterbilt 579. It was a Kenworth T680, officially licensed, rendered in the modern beautiful Prism 3D engine, with its dynamic lighting and gorgeous weather. You'd buy your first truck, that big, long chrome-plated nose stretching out in front of you, a sight unseen in ETS2. You'd turn the key, and you wouldn't hear the polite, high-revving whine of a European V6. You'd hear the deep, throaty chug-chug of a massive 15-litre American diesel engine. It was home. But then you looked at the map, and this is where the promise met a complex reality. Euro Truck Simulator 2, at launch, gave you a massive chunk of a continent. American Truck Simulator, on day one, gave you California. And, well, that was it. The state of Nevada was added in a free update shortly after, but at launch, it was just California. Players, used to the continent-spanning journeys of ETS2, were a bit taken aback. You could drive from Bakersfield to San Francisco in what felt like 20 minutes. The map was, to put it mildly, cozy. And there was a reason. This is our critical technical detail for the night. The problem of scale. The original ETS2 base map was built on a 1/19 scale, but it was an abstraction, built on older technology. To get ATS out the door, the team had made a decision. They built the launch maps of California and Nevada on a much more compressed 1/35 scale. This allowed them to cover the territory, but it had a side effect. It felt small, it felt old, the highways were short, the cities were just a few blocks. It felt, ironically, a lot like the old 18 Wheels of Steel games. The community, spoiled by the sprawling 1/19 scale realism of the ETS2 Scandinavia DLC, was concerned. Had SCS taken a step backward? The answer was a resounding no. Just a few months after launch, in a move of incredible boldness and respect for their community, SCS made a stunning announcement. They were going to fix it. They were going to redo the entire world. Here is our second, and perhaps more important, historical fact of the night. In 2016, SCS undertook the Great Rescale, a massive free project to rebuild the entire American Truck Simulator map, changing the scale from 1/35 to a new, more realistic and more spacious 1/20. This was a gargantuan task. Every road, every city, every single junction had to be pulled up, stretched out, and put back down. It delayed all new content. It was a huge investment, and it was, unequivocally, the best decision they ever made. This new 1/20 scale, which would become the new standard for all future ETS2 content as well, was the magic number. It was the perfect compromise between a realistic sense of distance and a map you could actually cross in a single evening. And it gave the map team the room they needed for true American infrastructure. No more tiny European roundabouts. Now they could build proper, sprawling, multi-lane cloverleaf interchanges. More importantly, it gave them room for the small, quintessentially American details. The trucker-only fuel lanes at gas stations. The ability to turn right on red, a small rule that makes driving in the US feel totally different. And the big one-way stations. That heart-stopping moment when you're cruising along and the sign flashes, "All trucks must enter way station." You'd pull off, crawl onto the scales, and the invisible inspector would give you the okay to proceed, or a hefty fine for an overloaded axle. This simple, mundane loop added a layer of immersion that was uniquely, perfectly American. The launch of American Truck Simulator was, in a way, a false start. It was the rescale that marked the true beginning. With the launch of the first paid DLC, Arizona, on this new 1/20 scale, the vision was clear. ATS would not be the sprawling, messy, old money empire of ETS2. It was the new, meticulously planned, high-tech frontier. The American dream was back, and this time, it was being built to last. One glorious, 1/20 scale state at a time. The American dream was being rebuilt, this time to the correct specifications. The Great Rescale of 2016 was a massive foundational promise. It established American Truck Simulator not as a quick spin-off, but as a parallel forever game, just like its European sibling. This decision, however, fundamentally changed the business of SCS Software. They were no longer in the business of making games, plural. They were now the full-time, dedicated custodians of two ever-expanding living platforms. The age of the yearly disposable 18 Wheels of Steel sequel was gone. The age of the DLC had begun. This, right here, is our key historical fact for the night. The shift from a fire-and-forget developer to a games-as-a-service studio, but in the quietest, most pro-consumer way imaginable. While other companies were pushing subscriptions and randomized loot boxes, SCS settled into a simple, honest rhythm. The base games, ETS, 2, and ATS, were the entry fee. They were the starting points. The real product, the true canvas, was the map itself. And this canvas, they decided, would be painted, one meticulously researched, lovingly crafted, premium-priced section at a time. This was the new business model. It was a model of patience. It wasn't about rushing out a new map every 6 months. It was about getting it right. And getting it right meant the evolution of a new kind of digital artist, the SCS map designer. These teams, now split into specialized groups for each continent, are not just level designers. They are a unique blend of virtual tourist, civil engineer, geographer, and landscape painter. This is our core technical detail, the modern SCS map creation workflow. It is a process of almost obsessive research. It begins not in a 3D program, but on Google Maps. The team will, for months, virtually drive the entire road network of a new state or country. They use satellite imagery to get the exact layout of a complex highway interchange. They use Street View to study the architecture of the buildings, the color of the soil, the precise type of pine tree that grows on a particular hillside. They study the infrastructure. What do the road signs in Spain really look like? How are they different from the ones in Portugal? What's the specific design of a German autobahn rest stop, and how does it differ from a French air? This obsession with regional detail became their hallmark, but they couldn't build it all by hand, piece by piece. The secret to building a continent is modularity. The team developed a massive internal library of prefabs. A prefab or prefabricated asset is a complex pre-built 3D model that can be dropped onto the map. That spaghetti junction in ATS, that's probably a single massive prefab that an artist spent a month building. The toll booths, the gas stations, the depots, the way stations, these are all high-quality reusable building blocks. The 120 scale in ATS and the similar 119 scale in new ETS, 2 areas, was the magic ingredient. It gave the artists room. Room for what? Room for identity. This is our geographic detail. In the old 18 Wheels of Steel games, a city was a gas station and a warehouse. In the new 120 scale, the team could create landmark assets. You don't just drive to Las Vegas, you drive down the Las Vegas Strip, past the recognizable glowing casinos, and under the Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas sign. You don't just drive to France, you see the distant, graceful silhouette of the Eiffel Tower from the highway. This dedication to recognizable, I've been there, moments transformed the game from a generic road simulator into a true virtual road trip. The result was a steady metronomic release of new high-quality territory. For Euro Truck Simulator 2, the map began to spiderweb outwards from its central European core, going east. In 2013 was the first, pushing into Poland and the studio's home, the Czech Republic. But the real quality leap came with Scandinavia in 2015. This DLC was the ETS2 equivalent of the ATS rescale. It was built on the new 120-ish scale, with a breathtaking level of new detail, from the massive, complex ports of Sweden to the winding, claustrophobic fjordside roads of Norway. This was the new standard. and they just kept going. Vive la France, Italia, beyond the Baltic Sea, road to the Black Sea, Iberia, each one added a new, distinct, and beautiful flavor to the world. Simultaneously, the ATS team was marching, state by state, across the American West. After the rescale, Arizona was released for free, as a thank you for the patience. Then came New Mexico, Oregon, Washington, Utah, Idaho, Colorado, Wyoming. Each state was a masterpiece of regional identity. The team didn't just paint desert, they painted the specific deep red rock desert of Utah, which looks and feels completely different from the high plains, sagebrush and pine desert of eastern Oregon. And this brings us to our human element, the virtual homecoming, the single greatest byproduct of this meticulous process. On the SCS forums and on Reddit, with every new DLC release, the same beautiful threads pop up. A trucker from Idaho or a resident of Spain will post, "I just drove past my house," or "I can't believe it, you modeled the little weird-shaped truck stop on Route 93. I know that truck stop. I've eaten there." People were buying the DLC not just to drive, but to explore a digital 120 scale version of their home. It created a powerful, emotional connection. And with that connection came a new army of passionate volunteer fact-checkers. SES, a post would read, "This is amazing, but the speed limit on the B25 outside of Burgos is 80 kilometers per h, not 90, and the team, to their credit, would often fix it." They were in a constant rolling dialogue with the very people who lived on the roads they were building. They were painting the map, yes, but they were doing it with the help of millions of cartographers. This slow, steady official expansion was one half of the story, but that open, inviting, and brilliantly designed Prism 3D engine, it had given the keys to the world to everyone, and the community was busy painting a map of its own. As the official, high-fidelity maps of Euro Truck Simulator 2 and American Truck Simulator grew, state by state, country by country, the SCS map teams were in a race against their own fans, because while the official developers were painstakingly painting their canvas, the community was building an entirely new one right next to them, and in some cases, they were building it faster. This brings us to the great, parallel universe of SCS gaming, the modding scene. This is not a small niche part of the experience. It is, for millions of players, the entire experience. The reason, as we touched on, goes back to the very bones of the company. The Prism 3D engine. It was built to be modular. It was built to be open. It was designed from day one to be tinkered with. This is our core technical detail for the night. SCS Software actively supports the modding community by providing the exact same set of tools they use to build the game, most notably the SCS editor. This isn't some dumbed down, my first map maker. This is the real, professional, and terrifyingly complex 3D development environment. To a new user, it's an incomprehensible wall of buttons and windows, but to a dedicated modder, it's the key to the universe. It's the tool that lets you lay down a new road, sculpt a mountain, place a building, and in essence, build your own world, right on top of the official one. This open door policy unleashed a Cambrian explosion of creativity that continues to this day. The modding scene is vast. You have the sound modders, who will spend 100 hours recording a real-life truck just to capture the perfect click of the indicator stalk. You have the graphics modders, who create new weather patterns, darker nights, and more realistic lighting, tweaking the game's atmosphere to perfection. You have the vehicle modders, who were adding classic, lovingly crafted 1980s Peterbilts to American Truck Simulator long before SCS got around to it, or who add entirely new vehicles like buses and cars. And this brings us to our human element, the player as the curator. For a massive part of the community, the game isn't just playing ETS2, the game is the setup. It's spending a Saturday evening not driving, but carefully curating a personal, perfect 150 gigabyte list of modifications. You're like a digital model railroad enthusiast, meticulously arranging your world. You have your favorite sound pack, your preferred physics mod that makes the truck feel heavier, the one classic Kenworth Bulbu 900 mod you can't live without, a pack that adds real-world company trailers, and of course a massive multi-gigabyte map mod. You spend an hour carefully arranging the load order, praying to the digital gods that the game doesn't just explode on launch. And when it finally loads, it's not ETS2 anymore, it's your ETS2. It's a unique, personalized and deeply intimate simulation that no other player has. But the crown jewel of this entire universe, the most ambitious and professional modding project of them all, is a map expansion called ProMods. Here is our key historical fact. ProMods is a massive multinational volunteer development team that has been building a high-quality map expansion for ETS2 since 2012. To call it a mod is almost an understatement. It is a professional-grade free DLC. As of today, the ProMods team, which consists of over 30 developers, has added or completely reworked dozens of countries. They've added Iceland, with its stark volcanic beauty and icy roads. They've added Ireland, the Balkans, Greece, and parts of the Middle East. They do this by requiring players to own all of the official SCS map DLCs, and then their map stitches itself onto the edges of the official world, creating one vast, seamless megamap of Europe. The quality is so high that SCS has on occasion hired developers directly from the ProMods team. They are, in every sense, the game's shadow developer. This of course existed in parallel with the other great community-built project, the one we touched on earlier, Truckers MP. This is the multiplayer mod. This is the Chaos option. It's an entirely separate experience where all AI traffic is removed and replaced by thousands of other human players. It's the MMO version of the game. It is, famously, the home of the Duisburg-Calais Road, a stretch of highway in the base game map that on the Truckers MP Simulation 1-inch server is a permanent 24/7 traffic jam, a war zone of flipped trucks, high-speed collisions, and general pandemonium. It is the absolute polar opposite of the sleepy single-player Zen, and millions of people love it for precisely that reason. This massive, creative, and slightly wild community created a fascinating new problem for SCS Software. Their official work was no longer just being judged on its own merits. It was being judged against the best of the free community-made content. And when the community, with ProMods, started rebuilding the old 2012-era parts of the base game map, SCS realized they had to do the same. The modders had set a new bar for quality, and now the original creators had to go back to their old work and bring it up to code. The era of the great rework was about to begin. That new bar for quality, set by the passionate community in ProMods and by SCS's own ever-improving DLC teams, created a fascinating and very visible rift in the game world. It was a kind of digital time travel. You could be driving through the stunning, meticulously crafted 2021-era Iberia DLC, marveling at the photorealistic olive groves and the complex, custom-built highway interchanges of Madrid. Then you'd take a job north. You'd cross the Pyrenees into the base game 2012-era France, and thunk, it was like hitting a temporal wall. Suddenly, the textures were flatter, the trees were the old, low-polygon lollipop models. The cities were, once again, just a simple loop of road with 2 depots and a gas station. It was jarring. It broke the illusion. This was the problem of map debt. Euro Truck Simulator 2 was now a decade-old platform. Its foundations, the core map that everyone owned, Germany, the UK, the Benelux countries, Eastern France, was a relic of a different time. It was the digital old world, and it was crumbling, visually, compared to the vibrant high-fidelity new world of the paid expansions. This wasn't just a problem for veteran players, it was a problem for new players. Imagine buying the game in 2020, tempted by the beautiful screenshots of the Scandinavia DLC, only to find that the starting area of the game looked like something from a different generation. This problem wasn't unique to ETS2. The American Truck Simulator team had faced this and solved it in one massive, surgical strike, the Great Rescale. They had ripped up their entire 135 scale map and replaced it with a new spacious 120 standard. ETS2, however, was different. Its map was already at the correct 119 scale. It wasn't the size that was wrong, it was the content. It was the technology. It needed a rework, not a rescale. And so, here is our key historical fact. SCS Software officially began the Great Rework Initiative, a massive, ongoing, and entirely free project to bring the 2012-era base map areas up to the modern DLC quality standard. This was not a single update. It was a new permanent fixture of their development pipeline. They formed new dedicated rework teams, whose job was not to build new paid territory, but to act as a virtual renovation crew, moving through the old world, district by district, and rebuilding it from the ground up. The first and most logical target was Germany. Germany is the heart of the ETS2 map. It's the central hub that nearly all players must drive through to get from west to east, north to south. And it was, by 2018, one of the oldest and most creatively designed areas of the map. The rework began. This multi-year, multi-patch project was a masterclass in open-heart surgery. This is our core technical detail for the night, the anatomy of a rework. What did they actually do? First, they'd go in with the digital bulldozer. They would completely delete the old highway junctions. Those simple, old, prefab clover leafs, gone. In their place, the team would handcraft a new, complex, multi-level interchange, often based on the real-world blueprints of that exact junction, using the modern asset library. Then they'd redraw the roads themselves, adding gentle curves, realistic banking, and updated textures. They'd replace the old, blurry ground cover with the new, high-resolution grass and flower assets from the Scandinavia DLC. They'd swap the old lollipop trees for the new, realistic, individually placed trees from the France DLC. The cities were torn down. The old, simple loops of Berlin and Munich were razed. In their place, new, more recognizable layouts were built, with custom-made landmarks, so that when you drove into Berlin, you would see the iconic Brandenburg Gate or the Berlin Victory Column. This project was, and is, a monumental undertaking, and it's hard to overstate the human element here. All of this was free. In an industry where publishers are constantly looking for ways to resell you the same content, SCS was investing thousands of developer hours, years of work for an entire team, into rebuilding a product that people already owned, and they didn't charge a single extra dollar for it. This generated an immense amount of community goodwill. It was a long-term investment in the platform. It signaled to the players that SCS was in this for the long haul. They weren't just going to let the old world rot while they sold new shiny islands. They were going to polish the foundation. They were proving that Euro Truck Simulator 2 was one single, cohesive, and ever-improving world. After Germany was largely completed, the rework teams turned their attention elsewhere. Austria was next, receiving a full, spectacular overhaul. Then, the team began the gargantuan task of rebuilding the oldest, most criticized part of the entire map, the United Kingdom. One patch at a time, the old, strange, looping roads of England and Scotland are being replaced with modern, realistic motorways and cities. Even in American Truck Simulator, the launch state of California, the first state, is now undergoing its own Phase 2 inches and Phase 3 inches reworks, as the team brings that 2016-era map up to the stunning photorealistic standard of the 2024 Nebraska or Arkansas DLCs. This commitment to the rework was the final piece of the puzzle. It was the ultimate promise to the community. It meant that no matter how big the world got, they would never forget the place it all started. It was a promise that this platform was not just a product, but a living, breathing, evolving hobby. A digital world that was slowly but surely being polished to perfection. The small studio from Prague had done it. They had built their world. They had populated it with real trucks, connected it with a social platform, and were now painting it, one beautiful state at a time, all while lovingly restoring its aging foundations. They were, in every sense of the word, the undisputed masters of their domain. And so, here we are. We have followed this quiet, unassuming thread from a post-revolution Prague office, through the pixelated forests of Deer Hunter, down the chaotic, abstract highways of 18 wheels of steel, and across two vast, meticulously recreated digital continents. We have watched a small, three-man startup evolve into a global, multi-million-dollar platform custodian. The story of SCS Software is, in its own way, the most relaxing and satisfying simulation of all, a simulation of steady, quiet, and profound success. They are, without any real competition, the undisputed kings of their entire genre. But how, in an industry of loud explosions, predatory monetization, and cynical, yearly rehashed products, how did a studio that makes a boring game about obeying traffic laws win so big? The answer, it seems, is that they won because they were boring. They won because they were patient. They won by being the absolute antithesis of the modern blockbuster AAA video game industry. While the rest of the world was chasing the hype cycle, that massive spike of marketing and sales, followed by an immediate precipitous crash, CS was playing a different game. They were not building a product to be consumed and discarded. They were building a hobby, a forever game. They were, in essence, the video game equivalent of a high-end model railroad company. They weren't selling a thrill, they were selling a sanctuary. This brings us to our final and most important human element, the real trucker anecdote. It is one of the most common and most validating stories you will find on the ETS2 and ATS forums. It's a post, not from a gamer, but from a real-life, long-haul truck driver. A man or woman who has just finished a grueling 12-hour, 600-mile real drive. They get home, their bones ache, they're tired of the traffic, the dispatchers, the regulations, and what do to unwind? They kick off their steel-toed boots, sit down at their computer, and they launch American Truck Simulator. It sounds like madness. It sounds like a busman's holiday of the highest order, but when you ask them why, the answer is simple, and it is the entire secret to SCS's success. Because they say, this is the job I wish I had. It's the good parts. It's just me, my rig, the open road, and no logbooks, no stress. It's just peace. SCS didn't just simulate the job of trucking, they simulated the romance of it, and in doing so they created the ultimate digital comfort blanket. Here is our final, key historical fact for the night. More than 12 years after its 2012 release, Euro Truck Simulator 2 is not a forgotten relic. It is, as of this very day, a permanent, immovable fixture on Steam's top 100 most played games list. It routinely boasts more concurrent, active players than brand new billion-dollar blockbuster releases. It is a game that has never, not for one single day, stopped selling. This long tail of success is a phenomenon. It is an institution. It proves that the SCS philosophy of steady, reliable, respectful development is not just a nice idea. It's one of the most successful, stable, and profitable business models in the entire industry. And the core of that philosophy is embodied in their greatest asset, the Prism 3D engine. This is our last technical detail. That engine is, by modern standards, an antique. It's a 25-year-old code base, its origins stretching all the way back to Deer Hunter. Any other studio on Earth would have abandoned it, licensed the shiny, new Unreal Engine 5, and started over. but SCS. They respect their engine. They respect the community that has built a decade's worth of mods on its foundation. So, instead of replacing it, they are engaged in a permanent, decade-long ship of Theseus. A small, dedicated team of engine programmers is still, to this day, rebuilding it from the inside out. They are, right now, in the slow, agonizing process of rewriting its core to support modern DirectX 12 graphics, to untangle its old code, to finally use multiple CPU cores to implement an entirely new physically based lighting system. This is a monumental technical challenge. It is, in many ways, harder than starting new, and they are doing it all for free, just to ensure that the platform they built in 2012 continues to thrive and improve well into the 2030s. That is the secret. That is how the small Czech studio conquered simulation. They didn't chase trends. They didn't betray their audience. They didn't rush. They just drove. They stayed in their lane. They obeyed the rules. They kept their cargo safe. And they delivered, year after year, with quiet, metronomic, and deeply admirable professionalism. They are the kings, not because they wear a crown or sit on a flashy throne, but because they are the reliable, steady, reassuring hum of a perfectly maintained engine, thrumming quietly in the background of an industry gone mad. They built the road, and it turns out that road is long enough for all of us, for a long, long time to come. And with that, our own journey comes to an end for tonight. We've traced their story, from a hopeful dream in Prague to a global digital empire. The story of SCS is in the end a comforting one, a story that proves that passion and patience and a deep respect for your craft can still, in this fast-moving world, build something truly magnificent, something that lasts. The cab is quiet now, the engine is off, just ticking softly as it cools. The glow of the dashboard is dim, and outside, the digital world is at peace. All the deliveries for tonight are complete. All the deadlines have been met. There are no more way stations to pass, no more chaotic junctions to navigate. There is just the soft, quiet satisfaction of a job well done. It's time to dim your own lights. Let the last of that highway hum fade into the background. Let your own thoughts begin to drift. The road, in all its digital glory, will be right here, waiting for you when you wake. But for now, it's time to rest.